Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest is a very funny and talented stand-up comedian. When I first met him, he was running the uber-cool underground comedy show, the National Midnight Society. It was a show that met in a dilapidated room behind a lamp store where well-known comics did sets that were dark and unusual. He has since gone on to produce multiple well-known television shows and is currently a producer on The Bachelor, The Bachelor in Paradise, and The Bachelorette. The interview that he gives here is raw and honest and beautiful, and I mostly just get in his way. Won't you please welcome Bill Dixon.
Do I start with, hi, my name's Bill, I'm an alcoholic?
You can if you like, or you can just, like, whatever.
So I grew up in the East Coast. This is interesting because it's not a conversation. So I'm just like, okay.
I mean, it can be a conversation too.
Sharing.
I mean, I'm here, so you can, like, you know, you can ask me questions too. It doesn't have to be like whatever. There's no boss.
So my parents met in rehab. That's how it started. So I'm a comedian now because my parents met in rehab. My mom was a like next level alcoholic. Like she had the problem of being an alcoholic, but also a brilliant person. And the thing with addiction is when you're an addict, you kind of you find every way possible to make your addiction okay and to facilitate that addiction. And when you're a very smart person, that makes a very dangerous person because she was so fucking manipulative and so brilliant at it. And so I grew up in this circumstance where my dad left when I was about 5 years old. And I grew up with this mother who was not only smart, an addict, but she was also like, she'd been diagnosed with bipolar and borderline personality. And so she would just disappear for long stretches of time, months at a time. I'd get dropped off at school. You know, mom wouldn't show up and then she'd just be gone for months. So I was just like, the beginning of my life felt like the fucking shelling of Leningrad. It was like, it was just started like that. It was just like right out the gate. It was, and so I grew up in AA meetings. I would, you know, although my mom would never be sober for more than about a year, I think the longest amount of time she probably had was about 18 months when I was a kid. And then...
Does she take you to meetings?
All the time.
Oh,
I grew up in meetings.
Right.
I grew up in those rooms. I remember when I was like 5 years old, we were moving out of a place we were living in, her and my stepdad, and they hired the movers. Movers came in, took all the shit out of the room. And then all the movers were hanging out in the living room, smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. And I was 5 years old, and I walk in and I go, what is this, an AA meeting or something? And that's embarrassing to them. The movers thought it was funny.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's like the weird benefit you get from all this bullshit is that, like, if nothing else, this kind of nightmare makes very funny people, right?
Right, yeah.
It makes you more interesting, and in the way, I mean, it just makes you funny because you have to be funny,
right?
Because it's the only thing. It's the only thing left,
right?
So when I was 12, my mom killed herself. She overdosed on pills, which was actually something I've just recently started to really deal with in a real way over the course of the past like 5 years or so. Because the thing about that was when she killed herself, I remember feeling an enormous sense of relief being grateful that happens. And that was a very difficult thing for a 12-year-old kid to carry around. You can't really say anything. You can't tell anybody. You don't, at least you don't think you can at that age.
Well, even if you can, it's like, even admitting it to yourself is a fucking impossible thing, I think.
Yeah, it's really like, in terms of when you're 12 years old, it's like if knowing yourself and understanding yourself is like BMX biking. At 12 years old, you can do like, you know, a few tricks, but overcoming something like that and being cool with that kind of feeling is like, that's like the backflip of mental health. It's like, if you can do that, then that's an impressive move. Like after talking to a therapist about it, he's like, you know, it's actually a thing that a lot of, you know, people in their 50s and 60s go through as they watch their elderly parents, you know, suffering in nursing homes, and they pass away.
That point where you're just like,
and then they're just like, thank God that's over with. And that's a lot for full on adults to handle.
Totally.
Thinking like that. And just because of how I was raised and because of how she was, I've just found myself in that position to have to feel that way and think that way at 12 years old, which is just like, that's Jedi level, you know, mental health stuff that I was wildly incapable of processing at that age. But so when she passed away, it was like, the best way I can describe it's like, it felt like the first 12 years of my life was like being Germany in World War II. And then like, when she died, it was like, we lost the war, but also thank fucking Christ, the war is over. That's
amazing.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I was like, how could he possibly tie this up? I'm like, oh, right, yeah, that works.
Like,
that's amazing.
It's like, man, we really fucked this up, but oh my God, it's over. So then you know, at that point I had a stepdad and a step grandma, thank God. And, you know, I think I was 14 when I took my first drink. It was, my buddy got us a case of beer and we drank it in the woods. I had half a beer. It was at nighttime. I remember throwing the beer bottle into the woods and pretending like I was fucked up. And then I remember looking back on that years later and going like, man, I was wasting good beer back then. That was my first drink, and that was an important moment because what it did was it destigmatized it for me.
Right.
Because there's so much terror associated with it, and so much worry, and so much, because I knew what I would end up being. And did like your parents, did they talk to you a lot about like, I mean, you were at AA meetings, so obviously you had seen, I mean, was there like editorializing after the meeting? Like you saw these things in there, Bill, like, or no,
was it just kind of left, or they were struggling themselves?
They were struggling. They were at the front lines. So
right.
There was no like, hey, what you just, I mean, they were coping with their own shit and they were trying to figure out their own shit.
Right.
So that moment for me was a big one because it made it okay. And
sure,
you know, I drank half a beer.
God, that's amazing.
I didn't die. Nothing happens. And the destigmatization of whatever it is that ends up destroying you that is a moment in every addict's life that, you know, it's the worst moment and it's the best moment, you know. And also it was me kind of facing, in a fucked up way, it was me facing this terrifying thing, this thing I've been so afraid of, the bottles of this stuff I'd find shoved underneath couch cushions and under, you know, in the water tanks of toilet bowls my entire life. The things I would, you know, find hidden in the garage, in the trash can, and like all this looming thing, and I'd put it in my body because fuck it, you know, because fuck this stuff. And then after this, you know, I was destigmatized, then it became okay. And then it turned into like going out and getting fucked up every weekend.
And are you living in the town you grew up in at that point?
Yeah, well, I'm living in Westchester, Pennsylvania.
Right. So you moved a little bit.
Moved, but we bounced around a
Right.
lot. You know, those first 12 years we were getting evicted from every place we were in. And so after my mom died, I actually moved in with a friend, our neighbor at the time, who had a kid my age, and we moved in with them. Very sweet family. I ended up living there for like 4 years. They had like dinner every night at a specific time, so it was like
structure.
So I just started partying, man. It was you know, at that age, growing up in that community and you know, outside Philadelphia, it was like pretty common for kids to just get fucked up every weekend. That's what you do in that part of the country.
Yeah.
You just, every 16-year-old just gets, hey, it's like, well, how are we getting beer this weekend? That kind of thing. And it was fun. And then like, as soon as I started living like that, all of a sudden I had a giant group of friends. You know, I was a cool kid.
Yeah.
How fun. Bill's fun. You start going, man. And, you know, just, and that's how it was for a while. I was just partying every weekend, and that became from 16 to 22. That's how it was. You just get fucked up all the time. And there's this interesting thing when you do go to college, when you're an alcoholic who started at age 16 or 15 or 14 or whatever it is, there's this weird moment where you're still kind of following the arc of everybody else's drinking.
Right.
Because people go to college and they start binge drinking and they start partying. And so you map yourself out against other people and you find you're maybe drink more than they do, but you're kind of in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
Everyone's fucked up every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
Totally.
I just happen to be fucked up a couple extra nights a week, you know?
Right.
And so you can kind of follow that trajectory for a little while.
Where were you going to college?
I went to the Art Institute. I bounced around a couple of places, as we do. Art Institute of Philadelphia, community college, and I was driving up to Penn State every weekend to get fucked up. And you know, I was like, my buddies would call me on a Saturday night at like 2:00 in the morning. Why aren't you here? And then I'd climb in my car with a case of beer and drive to Penn State 3.5 hours, drinking the whole way up, you know? And that was just how I lived my life. Like my early 20s, I would drink and drive that's the thing that would be the recreational activity. I would want to drive around because I like to listen to music, and, you know,
it's
take in the scenery.
Freedom of a car when you're young that just feels like, yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah, so I just literally get in my car with a bottle in between my legs and just drive around, crash my car, leave it, walk home. And you know, I was following that trajectory for a little while, and the same one that, at least that's the thing I told myself, right? I was probably drinking way more than everyone. But at the time, it felt like, well, at least I know my friends are fucked up right now. But then everyone starts graduating college, and you start to realize that, you know, they're not, everyone's kind of settling down with girlfriends or boyfriends and getting jobs, and everyone's not fucked up every night.
I'm still mystified by that.
And then I was like, how do you not? Wait, you just gotta have a glass of wine? What are you, an asshole? And then I just, you know, and then I stopped going to school. I got a job in Pennsylvania. They have beer distributors as opposed to like, so I'm sure you're familiar with this, but on the East Coast, there's a few states that there's designated places. You can't get it at 7-Eleven. You got to
go to like the state store.
You got to go to the state store.
Yeah.
So in
Packy.
In my brilliance, I got a job at a beer distributor, which was, at the time, what a great job. So I was just drunk all the time, all day. I would close the place down. I would lock myself in this beer distributor. They had a little tiny TV that was about, you know, and I would sit there, watch Antenna TV, and just pull a case of beer off the shelf and get fucking obliterated, take money from the drawer and walk home. And at the time, I was sleeping on my stepdad's couch, which is where I would stay for a few years, and then go home and pick up a bottle on the way home and watch West Wing on DVD.
Right.
This was just what I did.
Right. It seems like that's life.
Yep.
Like I'm an adult. Like what else do you expect? I'm doing my job.
Yep.
Like...
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, we find our little tricks. We find our, whatever it takes, whatever intellectual hoop jumping you have to do to validate whatever life thing you're doing. If you're a smart person, you'll fucking find it, man.
Sure.
You'll find a way to make whatever it is okay. And at first it was, I still have a job.
Yeah.
Or like I was still in school, and then you start leaning on other stuff. You start leaning on, then you get cynical, right? Then you get like, well, fuck it. The world doesn't care about me anyway. And like, fuck all this. And at that point I was drinking, a handle a day, working at this beer distributor on top of the case of beer I was having at work. And then I show up for work one day and the guy goes, I remember this. He's like, he goes, listen, I put up cameras last week.
Oh.
And I don't know what you expect from me right now, but you're lucky I don't call the police. And I just stood there in like total shock. And he looked at my face. He goes, don't look so surprised.
Right.
Like he was hurt by that I would even look surprised.
Damn.
I remember turning around and walking out and walking straight to, the liquor store, picking up a handle and going back home. And my stepdad at the time, I was hiding it from him, but
right.
I mean, he was like, I had in his living room, which I was living in, I had a dresser, which was just filled with, there was no clothes in there. It was just filled with liquor bottles. And I just drank and I drank and I drank. And then it got to the point where I would just, sit in the living room, drink all day until I black out, wake up whenever I wake up and immediately start drinking again, black out, start drinking again, black out, start drinking again. And then one day, at this point I'm drinking rubbing alcohol. I'm drinking hand sanitizer. I'm drinking fucking anything that had alcohol in it. There's nothing like waking up after drinking a few bottles of hand sanitizer, by the way. The taste in your mouth, it tastes like you've been sucking on a Glade plug-in.
Dude, it's got to be a whole other level of hangover there, too.
It's some next level shit. And then one day I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I'm in a bed. How great. And I realize I'm in an emergency room.
Oh, fuck.
And there's black chalk on my hands. And I had tried to kill myself.
Right.
I had written a note.
Wow.
I'd done all the things.
Jesus.
And I start piecing things together. Like, oh, I think I remember this. So I guess I had taken a bunch of pills in the house and called an ambulance, which is really more like an elaborate performance art piece than it is suicide attempt. But at that point, I was like, okay, well, I don't even remember doing it, so I'm going to go home because like I need to get fucked up. And they were like, oh, no, that's not how this works. Like, you're for sure going to a mental health facility. That's
amazing.
Right now.
That's amazing.
So they checked me into a mental health facility, and I'm like so confused. I'm like, oh, I need to get out of here right away.
Right.
But I'm in this mental health facility for 7 days. It's the first time I've been sober in a while.
They can hold you that long in that state. Whatever.
Well, yeah, they will hold you
until you're no longer a danger to yourself or something like that.
No, they will hold you for as long as the insurance that you have will personally cover you for.
Of course, there's got to be a profit motive here somewhere.
Right. So it's the maximum amount of days is the amount of days you need. I remember going in and after 24 hours, Like, I want to get the fuck out of here. And they're like, oh no, you need help. There's no way you're getting out of here. Then after 7 days in there, before I was leaving, going like, I don't want to go.
Right. Yeah.
I feel safe in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, you're for sure leaving. You don't have any more money.
Yeah. Who's paying for this? Who's paying for day 8?
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy.
Oh man. But I remember that was when I talked about destigmatization with the first drink. What that did for me in that mental health facility was destigmatize the help.
Right.
Which was equally as important.
Yeah.
So I had this realization that it's like, I figured out like, oh, this wasn't as scary as I thought it'd be. This isn't as bad as I thought it would be. And this is kind of nice. Of course, I immediately get out and start drinking again.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just, again, same. It took me no amount of time. No amount after that horrifying event that really fucked up my stepdad, really fucked up my brother. Because at the time he was on a bunch of, he had ADD. So I took all his fucking ADD medication. Because I'm an asshole. And you don't think about those ramifications. Not only is he going to school the next day without his medication, but he's going knowing that the medication that he should be taking, it just got pumped out of his brother's stomach. Right. So, and then you have to bury that. It's like, I can't possibly be present thinking about all these things I just did. So I immediately start going back at it again. And I just start going and going. And, it's about 2 months in and I'm totally out of money. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching the John Adams miniseries. I watched a lot of great TV while I was
John Adams miniseries. That's
HBO.
Paul Giamatti.
Paul
Giamatti is John Adams. I just don't get it. I'll never be able to get past that casting choice.
I will watch him do anything.
Really?
And the great part about getting sober was I got to rewatch all these things that I've
right.
I got to rewatch West Wing for the first time as a sober person. Oh, wow. I've really enjoyed this show. Yeah.
That's interesting. I had that experience with all my friends. Like, I basically felt like I had to sit all my friends down, take them all out for coffee and be like, so now who the fuck are you? Like, what are you about? Yeah. Like, I don't really know your deal. Like, I know you've told me and everything, but I was blackout drunk for most of that. So.
Yeah. 100%. So one day, watching the John Adams miniseries, it's 6:30 in the morning. There's people getting up, running outside.
Right.
I remember staring out the window and watching people running down, for exercise and going that's a different fucking planet.
I used to be like, I'd see that and I'd be like, I want that. I want that for myself. Like the few times that I would be out running in the morning, I'm like, I'm on the light side. Like I'm on the light side right now, which just felt so good. Felt so good to be in the light. Now I run all the time. It's dark as fuck.
So quickly, we forget that shit.
So you're looking at the people.
Looking at the people, and I'm just like, either I really, as fucked up as I was, I thought, I'm either going, what are my options here?
Right.
One, I kill myself right now, but make sure I do it legit this time. Let's not fuck around. Or I find a way to get sober and I just fucking, what can I do when I'm sober? Because that's the real thing. It's what do I do? Well, I've always wanted to be a comedian. It's the only thing I find interesting.
Right.
And that seems, I can do that because there's a really interesting position you find yourself in when you grow up in a situation where, people all the time will be like, oh, you had such a, you had a really tough life. You had a really tough upbringing. That must have been very difficult for you. And you started and you self-motivated and you did all this stuff. There's something so fucking liberating in having people have zero expectations of you. It's really the best. I have friends who come from very wealthy families who then decide to become a comedian, and their parents are still all over them going what
the fuck is this?
What are you doing? You fuck. For me, I'm any monicum of success whatsoever. Everyone's like, oh my God, Bill, you are how did you do it? How did you do a bringer show at the comedy show? Oh my God, you miracle. So any amount of success is like, wow. So that was the liberation there. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? Fuck this.
You decided in that moment to become a comedian? Or
when I was,
to just
it was like one of those moments where I would have this moment a year later, but the moment of realizing like, the Sixth Sense moment of realizing like, when I was, 10 years old while all my buddies were playing basketball, I was on my bike listening to George Carlin on a VHS tape.
Right.
Like listening to Todd Barry albums when I was like 13 years old.
Right.
Like all this shit that was just like, this is not something that could have like, growing up where I did, it's not like there were a bunch of comedy fans.
Right. Yeah.
I somehow absorbed this from
amazing.
Culture and linked on to this stuff and was just obsessed with it. And when, a year later, it's like, and from my first microphone going, I've been dead the whole time. This is what I should have been doing this entire time. Like, I figured it out. Like, of course I'm a comedian. Like, look at all the things that were signs that this is what I should do.
So how do you get from...
So in that moment, I kind of figured out like, well, I'm going to do this crazy thing. And worst case scenario, I can kill myself later. That's really an option that's still on the table today. It's amazing. Like, I can always just kill myself.
I have kids, so I can no longer kill myself.
Yeah, you fucked up.
It's fine. It sucks.
You really ruined it. So in that moment, I called my cousin, and I said...
was he a sober person or no?
Nope. Right. I was just like, I need a ride to the emergency room.
Right.
Because for me...
That's where you go.
The destigmatization happens. Right. That's how I started in an emergency room.
Right.
A bunch of smarter adults figured out something to get me to a place. Maybe they can do that again.
Yeah.
But in a rehab, I assume it'll be similar.
Yeah.
And so happened, I called and I got checked into an emergency. It was actually really great of him. And he drove me to the emergency room, didn't ask me any questions. Of course, like everyone in my life knew I was fucked up. So they were just like, dude, whatever you got to do. I was like, I just have to, I'm not okay. And I need to get better.
Yeah.
So I check into this emergency room. And of course, at this point, everyone had graduated college. So a friend of mine from high school was my nurse, which is just like an extra layer of shame on top of everything else.
Yeah.
She's all clean and adult.
Right.
And I'm, dirty and fucked up. And she was very sweet. I was just like, hey man, like whatever it's got to be. You're trying to get help. So I checked into rehab. And they found me a bed and I checked in and, they took my shoelaces away from me. And that's where I was for a month. And that was the best experience of my life. I have a joke in my act of like, rehab's so great because it's the only place where you can cry in your sweatpants at noon and everyone tells you you're doing a great job.
Right.
And that was so, there was a moment where I woke up that first day and I started my timeline. So the moment I walked into that rehab, I had tried to do everything right.
Right.
And I woke up that next morning and went, you feel fucked up right now. But over the past 24 hours, you've done everything you were supposed to do.
Where the fuck did you learn to think like that?
I don't know.
I mean, that's amazing.
I don't know. It was a great way to be able to put my past behind.
Jeez. I mean, that's like the whole thing right there, practically.
I'm like a super bright guy when I'm and another time so profoundly stupid. But yes, I was there for a month and I was so fucking terrified to leave. Because I was like, this is so safe in here. This is so goddamn safe.
And did you feel like better? I mean, did you feel like health? How old are you at this point?
New person, 25 years old.
25. So your body can basically rebuild itself completely at that
100%.
age,
I started within that 30 days. I mean, I'd gained, 65 pounds or whatever from binge drinking and eating.
Oh, right.
garbage. And so like I felt like a brand new person. I looked like a totally different human being.
It's weird if you put like hand sanitizer into your MyFitnessPal. It doesn't actually give.
Yeah.
It's weird. It won't give you a calorie count
Yeah.
for that. Like I drank 2 gallons of that. Yeah, she just won't tell me how many. It's fucking annoying.
Oh God.
So sorry.
So yeah. Now I got out of rehab and I was like, well, I'm doing it. I'm gonna move to Chicago and I'm gonna start doing comedy and I'm gonna do all this stuff.
Well, why Chicago? Just because it's like such a comedy place, or you had people there?
Because it's right in the middle, and I had some people there, and my sponsor actually was moving back to Chicago. So I found a sponsor about a week after I got out of rehab.
So you get out of rehab, you start going to AA meetings?
Yep, right away, every day. I lived there because it felt like the closest thing to rehab.
Yeah, totally.
And found a good group of people, which is so fucking important. You got to find that group of people. And found a new group of friends and was, and then my sponsor was like, well, I can only sponsor you for X amount of weeks because I'm moving back to Chicago.
Oh, right.
And then by the time that rolled around, he was like, hey man, if you want to come to Chicago, it seems to be like you want to do comedy?
Yeah.
Maybe, get out of your dad's living room where you've been binge drinking for X amount of... And I remember my stepdad being really scared of me moving to Chicago.
Sure.
But I was so sick of what I was doing and where I was living and just the cycle of and coming back into that living room.
Is that living room still there? Like, is your stepdad still there?
No. No. So I just moved to Chicago, man, and rented a room for $400, had a trash bag full of clothes, and fucking the happiest motherfucker in the world. The happiest human being on the planet. Just everything was new. When you first get sober, it's like, oh my God.
Right.
Everything's brand new. And that's where I started. And that's where,
What did you know about stand-up at that point?
So little.
Really?
I watched a lot of it. And it's like, I think the most confident you'll ever be in an art form is the moment you decide you can do it. That is the most. So it's like the moment you look at a painting and you go, there's a moment for everybody when they're either, looking at a painting or sitting in the audience of a comedy show. And you say to yourself, I could do that. That's the most confident you'll ever be in that art form,
right?
Ever in your entire life. Because then
you think that's before you've actually started.
You
doing
haven't
it.
even started doing it. It's the moment you realize you're going to,
right? And
the
you're
most
excited.
Confident you'll ever be. And the first time you try it, you free fall, and you are like, this is not possible.
What was your first what was your first toe in the water for?
In Chicago, in a bar, I'd written a set. All I knew was Comedy Central, so I had written 3 minutes of material. So this was like pre-Obama election. I'd written I had a John McCain joke, which I can't remember. I had 3 jokes. I knew I had 3 minutes. Each joke was about 40 seconds long. I wrote in to this set. I allowed time for applause breaks for this open mic I was going to. I had written in applause breaks.
That's amazing.
Because I just knew Comedy Central.
Yeah.
I didn't fucking know what I was doing.
Right.
And so I go to this bar. There's 20 people there. There's a microphone. The host says, all right, come on stage now. Really funny comedian. Please welcome Bill Dixon. So in that moment, a few things happened. 1, somebody just called me very funny.
Right.
2, somebody just called me a comedian.
Right.
Someone just welcomed me to a stage. I walk up to a microphone. There's lights. I didn't anticipate the lights. Never really spoken into a microphone before. So there's 15 things that have happened that I've put so much pressure on. Because I'm supposed to be dead if this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I stare out at the audience. I black out. I can't remember a fucking word of what I'm supposed to be saying. I'm just staring at a group of people. I forget everything. And then I go, I'm sorry. I can't do this. And I go to walk off stage, and a nightmare I did not think was possible occurred. The open micers heckled me back onto stage.
Wow.
They go, no, you can't do this. So I was heckled back onto stage. Pure nightmare. And I just start talking. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. I yank the microphone out of the stand. I just start going. I'm doing my best Dane Cook impression. Right?
Right.
Like running around, leaning on things. And I see all these lights and I'm like, oh, fuck, man, I'm crushing right now.
Right.
People are taking photos of me. I'm like, oh my God, this is magic. And then I hear, we've been lighting you for 2 minutes. Get the fuck off the stage, asshole. So I'm thinking people are taking photos of me and I'm just getting like, and of course I invited friends out. They were recording me. It was, and then,
so that recording exists somewhere. Theoretically.
Somewhere. And I
suppose that's before the cloud, though, so it's probably harder to track down.
I was on like some weird mini
thing
disc
or something.
Right? It was on like a DVD,
right.
But like a tiny, like some weird.
I still remember that
consumer brands
thing, yeah.
bullshit. And so that's the last time I did stand up for about a year. But then, I was writing every day, and still.
What are you doing for work at that point?
Oh God, I started working at a nursing home in North Side Chicago.
Oh wow.
So then I do that during the day and then go home and then just like write, try to do mics, start taking Second City classes,
doing that. So you're taking some classes. That's good.
Yeah. And then,
And did you find like any support in that community? Did you feel like there was a community there that you could kind of tap into a little bit?
At that point, I didn't feel confident enough with regular people.
Right. So your community's kind of recovery at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all I would mingle with people who were normal. It's
right.
Like, that's how, that distinction is something you draw in the first couple years and in whatever your recovery program is.
Yeah,
and there's and the particular recovery program that I came up in at the time, the group of people there really, which I don't necessarily love, is they really drew a distinction between, real heavy on the normies shit. And the normies don't get that. It's like this real, like, where
I guess that can really help you.
It can to a certain degree,
to a point.
But if it becomes an us and them thing, I understand the utility of it, of like functioning as like, hey, just so you know, you can't do the same things as like,
right.
You're not
normal.
Yeah, you're not.
Like, don't kid yourself, even though you're feeling normal
now.
But
when it's like a Professor Xavier's X-Men kind of situation where it's like it's them and then it's us,
right?
And we have this secret, so like ride slow. That wasn't particularly helpful in helping me make real connections with human beings, because I feel like a lot of recovery for me is like, when you're in addiction, you're starting at like the -5 position where everyone else is starting at 0, and it's like trying to catch up to 0, and then you can start a life.
Yeah.
Right? So I think
it's funny, when I was first in, getting sober, and I'd go to AA meetings and they would celebrate birthdays and people would be like, I'm 1, I'm 4. And I'm like, no, you're 28, you're 32. Like, what is this? And then as I got deeper into it, I realized like just how damaged and like misguided so much of my thinking was and my approach to my life up to that point. I was like, oh, I really am 4. Like,
right.
Like, I've really only been living
100%
the like sort of closer life that I should be living for 7 years now,
right.
So I really am like on some, and then that actually also helped me kind of give myself a break. I could do dumb shit and be like, I'm 7. What do they expect? I'm a toddler.
Totally. Somebody told me, I had one of the therapists in rehab said, it's like, think of it like this. He's like, whenever you started drinking, that's kind of the age you stopped at. And then when you stop drinking, you kind of start from that point because
Yeah.
you've completely stunted yourself emotionally.
Totally.
You've literally stunted yourself physically. Like hair hadn't come into my face because like I started binge drinking. When you start binge drinking at 13, that fucks up your entire, like, the ecology of your body.
Yeah, I think I got fetal alcohol syndrome at 12. I gave it to myself in my tween years.
Oh, God. So those first couple of years was just like, was never... I also feel like there's this interesting thing where, and I'm still like this to a certain degree, much less so now, but I feel like when you're an addict, like you're built for tragedy. Like, I feel like if there were a zombie apocalypse, I'd want to be at a fucking AA meeting. Because those motherfuckers are like, what, the world's burning? Bring it, motherfucker. We've seen this shit before.
Yeah.
But, like, if I get a parking ticket, it's just like, I get all flustered and like, great, another parking ticket. Like, I can't handle this. It's like, but if everything's burning to the ground, like, oh, I'm built for this.
Yeah,
I'm built for the ends of the world.
The catastrophic events.
Catastrophe. I feel like we are like, oh, what? There's people eating people? Not a problem.
It's fine.
It's totally fine.
I remember having this conversation with my sponsor, and I was like, well, I was just like talking about my fears of, dying alone and broke in, some studio apartment without any air conditioning. And he's like, well, does that be so bad? And I'm like, nah, I'd be fine with it. It really doesn't like the tragic end doesn't worry me. I'm with you. It's more like the death by 1,000 paper cuts that is so hard to deal with. Yeah,
it's like I can deal with the zombies coming down the street. It's like if one of those zombies is like passive aggressive towards me, then I'm like, I'll obsess about it.
Like, God damn.
For like, did I say something?
Why does he hate me?
Why does he not like me? I don't understand. I am broken. I am terrible.
So how do you get from Chicago to LA?
Well, I at the time Facebook was kind of new.
Right.
And so I would watch all my favorite TV shows.
Right.
I would write down all the writers' names. I would friend them all on Facebook, and then I would send them my shit.
Wow. So you must have there must be that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
How many years ago is that now? 10 years ago?
Something like that. Yeah. Geez, probably like 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's a writer, David Feldman, who he did like Dennis Miller show back before Dennis Miller, turned into what he is now.
Right. So like, weird. How does that happen?
Someone told me once Dennis Miller's sense of humor was in Tower 2, which I think is so funny. He really flipped the switch. But yeah, so he wrote for all these things. He was like, hey, you're really funny, which is like the first time a professional with Emmys has ever said, I'm funny.
Right.
Which was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
He's like, I have this shitty little like radio show thing that I do. Like, you can come hang out if you want to. And I remember like, well, that's a job.
Right.
And just moving out to LA. And yep, that's where it all started. And I got to write dumb sketches for no money with, Martin Short, Robin Williams, Eddie Pepitone, like all these fucking guys. They were just buddies who would just come, all these old writers from Dennis Miller show would just show up. And, we'd all sit around, write sketches, and
that's amazing.
And it was just like this unbelievable class that I was so excited for. And learned a lot of good lessons in there. Learned a lot about, I remember one time I wrote this Lindsay Lohan sketch because that was a thing at the time. And I showed it to the guy. He's like, to David Feldman. He was like, what the fuck is this? Mm-hmm. I'm like, it's Lindsay Lohan sketch. He's like, she's a kid. She's suffering with drug and alcohol problems like you did.
Wow.
She's having a fucking rough year.
Right.
Like, we don't punch down. This is easy. That's
amazing.
Don't punch down. Never punch down.
Yeah,
I remember walking away from that whole experience. And then from that, just started doing a shit ton of stand-up and getting better at what I do, and then accidentally getting jobs producing comedy things, and then fast forward through all this shit, and And then I get to produce The Bachelor, and
That's what you're doing now,
yeah,
right?
like all this crazy shit. Get to travel a bunch and live a really weird life, doing stand-up all the time, and still sober. And
how long have you been sober now?
Almost in June it'll be 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And for me, it's always trying to remember. I remember there was this moment in rehab when they handed me my shoelaces back. That was a big moment for me. That was an important moment for me. I was responsible enough to have my shoelaces. Well, they took them away from me because they didn't want me to kill myself.
Yeah, sure.
There was a moment in my life I have to remind myself when I'm like, I have a medium or shitty set somewhere, or, you know, I'm late for a flight to some fuck you country, and reminding myself that there was a point in my life where I was excited to get shoelaces back.
Yeah.
Like reminding myself that like, I'm really I'm a drink away from that dude. I'm always a drink away from that dude.
It's interesting because you talked in the very beginning, just like that, the destigmatization of booze, like this thing that had obviously been so destructive in your family, to then like cross over that. And like, I certainly like one of the things that keeps me from ever drinking again is the idea that I'll have to start counting from zero. Like I just can't accept that. Like 100%. I just cannot go back to that. And, but I could see if there were some sort of gray area where you could like overcome that stigma, and then you'd just be dead. You know, you'd totally toast.
I've had 2 moments of my life where things were destigmatized. One of those moments was walking into rehab. One of those was having my first drink. And I'm not willing to figure out... having another drink would mean I'm destigmatizing the idea of a relapse.
I mean, I think, you know, it's funny. Yeah, totally.
And
totally.
I can't afford to do that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I guess, like, I mean, I stopped drinking a lot later in life. I was 40 and, like, whatever, you know, just, like, shit wasn't going my way. It hadn't been going my way for a long time. And, like, and I hated drinking. And I was like, this is at least one thing that I can fucking get rid of. And who knows what'll happen. But, like, I know it's bad. Like, why cling to this thing that's fucking ruining so much of, like, my self-worth, if nothing else, right? And who knows, maybe something good will come of it. But you know, now that I've been sober for 7 years, like I'm not at all interested in drinking. Like it never doesn't seem to me like a solution at all. I mean, I would say a bigger challenge for me is like I look at like the legalization of pot and like all my friends taking ayahuasca all the time. And I'm like, it seems interesting. Like I mean, like I never had a problem really with that stuff, and like that seems a little bit more scary to me. Like that's a line I could definitely cross. But the other thing you said that was so interesting to me was the you know, the intelligence of your mom, and just like the ability to apply that intelligence to deceit, basically, and the lies we tell ourselves and the lies we tell the people around us. And like, you know, I'm not a dumb guy, all right? I mean, I definitely like, I worry. I mean, I definitely like, I know how, you know, how capable I am of lying to myself and like how capable I am of lying to everyone. And like these, it's weird in like, you know, when I was drinking and stuff, like just the lie that I was fine was really the biggest lie. Right. Yeah. And like, I would be like in a business meeting trying not to vomit, you know, and somehow convincing myself that was cool. I mean, like it's like, and, until you said that, I haven't really thought about this idea of like, to what degree is that level of like toxic manipulation still at work in my life? It's probably something I need to explore. I mean, I do, you know, sometimes you're doing stuff and you're like, what what am I really, why, comedy is a particularly thing. Like, there's like, I don't make a lot of jokes about my wife. Like, I just like, it's just like, it just feels like a betrayal. Like, she didn't sign on for this. Like,
right.
Like, I have no right to like, I mean,
Sure.
every now and then, sure. But, I don't do a lot about it. I don't know. It's just,
I think that's good. I think that's good, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, if nothing else, it protects the marriage. But,
Right.
I want, like, that's a place where I've been, pretty honest with myself. But there are other areas where I'm like, to what degree am I exploiting my life for other people's entertainment? Like, am I just an exhibitionist? Like, I look at Louis
Right.
C.K. and like that whole insanity with just like, whipping his dick out all that. Now that I know more, I have less in common with Louis C.K. than I used to worry about when that story first broke. I'm like, I could see myself like being like, hey, I'm going to jerk off in front of you guys. Is that cool? And just like, or whatever. Like I am like, I'm an exhibitionist on some level, but I mean, maybe, but then there's also that whole thing with like, using and doing drugs where you're flirting with death the whole time. And comedy is a bit of that too. Like that sense of like, you're doing something that's so, so dangerous, that like most people, when you talk to them about it, they're like, why do you do that? It's, particularly when you do badly because, it happens. And I do feel like, there was always that excitement when you were, taking a fat rail of coke that you were going to kill yourself, on some level. That was like, yeah, we're doing it.
We're burning this bitch down.
But, that sort of relentless reexamination of your own twisted psyche, I think is, I don't know, just like someone that you love so much, and that they're intelligent, and yet, I don't know, we all put up with a lot of insanity from the people who are closest to us. So, I feel like I've just gone down like a crazy rabbit hole of nonsense, but, what are you doing now?
Oh, that's good. Producing some TV shows.
Are you going to produce another stand-up show? You had that regular show that I loved. The
National Midnight Society.
Yeah,
I love that.
That was such a great show. I mean, I loved it particularly when it was in that weird, funky space above the thing.
Yeah.
You sort of climb up that staircase and wedge yourself in the back, and there was a guy playing guitar or whatever it was.
For 3 months, that was the best show in the city.
It was amazing. I mean, and the stuff I saw there was just.
Well,
I remember seeing Kate Berlant there in that space.
Yeah,
and
she
just
hosted
like,
that show for like.
She was
a month.
It was just like the perfect. It was just like the perfect venue for her particular insanity. But
I've talked to like a lot of comedians who, for anyone listening, I used to run a show where I'd give comedians larger chunks of time to work out experimental or dark material, so the audience kind of already knew coming into it, like, hey, this is going to be weirder than normal. If you want to go see beep bop boop tit tat jokes, you can go to one of the big clubs. But if you want to hear, somebody try out like a 15-minute bit about their talking butthole or something about, for me, it was, my mom's suicide shit, like that, that was the place to do it. And so many comedians would come up to me like, yeah, I have a whole like 30-minute thing like this. I was able to write my special because of the freedom I had in this room.
Yeah, that's so cool
to be able to work on this stuff, because it's a little tough for comedians to work on darker weirder shit
when
in the club.
At the club, and they're expecting you to deliver the goods, and you're like, yeah. Do you still? I mean, definitely the other thing I'm gonna take out of this conversation is just like being like, I did okay the last 24 hours. Like, I mean, there are just so many. I mean,
That's such a huge thing. If you can just like, because I have so much anxiety anyway. Like, everything is. I'm constantly anxious all the time. But what helps is lying in bed and going like, what have I done over the past 24 hours?
Right. Totally.
This is totally good. This is totally fine. You had that nice meal. Remember when you had that soup? God, you really enjoyed that soup. You did that today.
Right,
you had a nice suit.
Totally. I do that too.
You masturbated in under 5 minutes.
Sometimes
you didn't waste your time.
Do this thing where I go when it's bad, when I've gotten down, a canyon and there's no way out, and I'm like, how the fuck did I get here? And then I'll go back and I'll look at all the choices I made to get there, and I'm like, they were all pretty good choices.
Yeah.
That didn't work out. Turned out they were all wrong. Right. But in retrospect, I can't really blame myself. I think I probably would have made those same dumb choices again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a useful way to look at life, and it's also very like, gotta be compassionate with yourself, man. You gotta be able to tell yourself if it's your first night in rehab, or if it's fucking 15 years later and your shit's worked out, and you still have to have that same compassion with yourself, no matter if because you need it the whole time. Not once you're sober, you're not fine. It's not like, oh, I'm fine now. Like, you still need to be able to give yourself that love, and you need to be able to talk to yourself and have a conversation with yourself. For so many years of my life, my relationship with myself was like a roommate, where I lived with me, and it's like, he's weird, but he pays his utilities, and I don't talk to him, but, don't want to have a meal with the guy, but he's okay, I guess. But, I have to do the thing where, like, I try to make eye contact with myself in the mirror. Right. At least, like, once a week, where I, look and just check in. And you're okay? Yeah. Would you have dinner with yourself at this point? I think so. It'd be totally civil. Jeff Garland actually has like this great thing he does where he says, like, I wake up in the morning, I look at myself in the mirror and go, hey, buddy, how's it going? He just looks himself in the mirror every day and yells hello to himself. Right. Which I think is great. That's amazing. Like, you have to be able to love yourself at least occasionally. I know that that's like a tough thing, and it seems base, and but that can be done in a lot of different ways. And, in the same way that, like, my relationship with some of my family is just like, they live on the East Coast, but I like recently been trying to like check in with my brother more and just be like, send him a text message like once a week, be like, hey man, I love you. Right. And he appreciates it. And I think that we have to do that with ourselves too. You have to be able to like just check in once a week and be like, hey man, like, even if you don't want to say, just be like, I love you. Thank you for this. And just be able to say that to yourself every once in a while is good. Yeah, that's good. The fuck do I know? Be like, hey Nick, you're doing all right. That's what I say to myself. Yeah. Like, you know what? You're fine. You're doing all right. You had that nice soup today. You're doing your best. You had that. I look back through my Instagram and be like, yeah, you know what? It wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad. Yeah, you did okay. Bill, I mean, that was amazing. Thank you so much for coming in. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It was really... Did this go okay? I have no idea. It was great. I thought it was great. When I go into podcasts, I have no idea. No, who knows? Drunkalogs cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogs theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick Morton.